Attention is the new currency of the good life. If you can't focus, you can't learn, you can't connect, and you can't create. We live in a world designed to steal your focus, and without intentional effort, you will lose the capacity for deep work, the very thing that leads to profound fulfillment. Hey everyone, welcome to It's the Good Life. I'm one of your hosts, Josh. This is Anthony. This is David, and we're going to be talking about attention and focus this morning. So when I think of attention, I like to think of the lack of it that I have.
Me too.
You know, there's actually a pretty funny story of attention and myself as a kid. And when I was we would go on like these annual vacations in the winter. I think you know what I'm talking about. And there was this one time when we were. I was hanging out with my cousins, and we were playing Monopoly, like the board game, and they had a TV on in the room, and I'm notorious because of my ADHD. If the TV's on, I'm basically glued to it, like as if my face is literally on it. And they basically developed a rule when we were playing, because every time it would be my turn, I would take like 20 minutes to like do my turn, because every time I was just like looking at the TV.
Don't you just like roll the dice too?
Yeah, you think you would think, right? And so basically they developed like an under the table rule that if I don't start my turn within 20 seconds, they'll just pass me.
Oh.
And so apparently I was passed like 30 times.
No.
Because every time like Josh.
Just lost.
I was completely
lost in communication.
Lost in the TV, and I feel like that's so much so like how phones, how social media, how entertainment, like just in general, like how our culture is treating attention nowadays. It's like we're kind of all glued to the screen, kind of like Big Brother, you know, like we're just glued to media. And so just kind of thinking about that conversation, I kind of started off with this idea of talking about how attention is a currency, and we've kind of hinted at this idea, talking about like procrastination and talking about social media use and stuff like that, how like attention is limited. But I guess something I want to invite us to kind of explore today is like, do we treat attention like a currency? No, we talked about that movie. I forgot what it was. You know what we're talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
That was more about time.
Right.
I think the same concept could be applied
Back to the Future?
attention. No.
Oh, okay.
No. But anyways, yeah. So just kind of, I think an opening question I kind of want to start off with, and I've always felt convicted about this, is why can we spend 3 hours scrolling but can't focus on a book / the Bible for 30 minutes?
Well, I think it's interesting thinking about the attention as a currency too, because it's in a way that's like you're paying something forward in order to, in terms of currency, you're trading something for something else, right? And so in attention, you're like giving your attention in order to get maybe like satisfaction or to get pleasure or to get whatever it is. But I think the reason why it may be hard to answer your question is I think because there's just so many distractions. Like, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. The more distractions there are, I think, the harder it is to be attentive. But then the least distractions there are, the easier it is to have attention, and so the more focused you could be. So I think there's a relationship between like focus and attention and procrastination, as we talked about in previous episodes too, to kind of build the conversation in.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I wanted to get at too. Is I was actually you're jumping ahead a little bit.
Ooh, sorry. How to look at the show notes?
Is the inverse relationship between attention and distraction?
Yeah.
Like when you have more distraction, you have less attention. When you have less distraction, you have actually more attention, which is demonstrated by focus, which is another focal point of what we're trying to talk about here. What about you, David, in terms of like thinking about attention as a currency?
I think that
like for you?
What it brings up for me is the thought of, I think, the engagement and the ideas that come through that engagement. If it's interesting, then that's something your intention is more, I think, lean towards.
Mhm.
But if it's something that is more on the necessarily boring side, then you're not as engaged. And so I think we lose focus because of that.
Okay.
So I think as a currency, almost the exchange of how interesting and how engaging a topic or a concept or an idea might be allows us to have so much more focus in particular areas of our life.
Well, it's interesting. We talked about that with a little bit with procrastination, right?
Mm.
Like I posed that question at the beginning, and I said, "So, what do you guys feel like is you tend to procrastinate more on?"
Mm.
And it's like, well, honestly, it's stuff like you tend to be able to focus on things that you enjoy more easily. So, like when we're working on the podcast, when you're playing video games or bouldering, it's like I don't imagine you're doom scrolling while you're climbing a wall. Like
I think there's this conversation though about multitasking too that I would love to like entertain, because then I love doing this podcast and like, but right now like my mind could still be thinking about the plane that I'm going to catch in a few hours. Like that's still possible in the moment when I'm engaged in an activity that I'm interested in.
yeah.
So I'm just curious to think about how that whether that's avoidable or whether it's still, distraction is still present even in engaging in an activity that you're interested in,
Yeah.
that you're passionate about.
Right. So it's like,
Right.
let's say it's bouldering and you have a flight after bouldering. It's like, just because you're doing the thing that you enjoy doesn't like protect you from being distracted.
Right.
Essentially.
I think I'd love to think about distractibility more just expanding the definition to more than just doom scrolling, but the mental distraction.
Oh yeah.
Like psychological distraction. Like what's the noise in your head, David, that's telling you like, oh, you can't do this, or you're climbing on the wall, but you could be thinking about something else. You could be talking to your girlfriend, but you could be thinking about your I don't know, your dad, your mom, whatever it is. Or school, like something else is on your mind.
Yeah.
You're not physically, and I think this is why this topic is so important, I think, to the adulting population too, is that it's obviously a pressing thing, right? Like we can't engage and be present in an activity if we're thinking about other things that are going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think that's why it's worth listening to, or just worth talking about this in general.
With expanding like the definition of distraction, I mean, I was using doom scrolling as like sort of a rudimentary representation of distraction.
Yes.
But obviously, I know distraction can come in many forms. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional. You know, right? Like, I don't. We're kind of getting ahead here, but like when it comes to like a breakup, right? Like how thrown off your life becomes indirectly as an outcome of the emotions that are like preoccupying your mind.
I would say it's pretty unfazed.
Oh, whatever.
No.
The exception in that.
No, I'm kidding. No, all honesty, it's difficult for sure. Yeah.
Well, one thing I kind of wanted to kind of hit on to close that idea about attention as a currency. I think that a lot of times we're told to treat attention as a currency as if it's on a debit card, right? Versus the reality of currency is actually a wad of cash, right? You only have, and what I mean by that, and this might be like my own personal finance decision, is that for me, it's like I take out my fund money, like the money I use for myself, in cash. Even if I spend it online, I convert it back to digital money and then instantly spend it.
Okay.
Because with a debit card, right, you can't feel the loss, right? It's sort of this digital loss, like that money gets taken out and you really have it. There's nothing that really changes on a physical standpoint. But when you give cash away, you're like, oh my gosh, like I am giving something away. And that sort of mentality, I think, is so critical for thinking about currency, attention as a currency, because it's like, yeah, you are giving away precious time and focus that could be used either for your benefit or either for your deficit, and not only in like the present moment, but for your future. And so, just that was just kind of one thing, one sort of imagery that I wanted to paint when it comes to thinking of attention as a currency. But definitely moving into the concept of distraction. I don't know about you guys, but when I find that I'm really distracted, I also tend to be more anxious, more restless, more spread thin, right? Because like I think there's also this relationship between being attentive and being present. You know what I mean? And so I'm kind of trying to sort of flesh out distraction and being present, and how like distraction takes you away from depth in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say like our ability to be present is definitely. I think the idea of like multitasking too has kind of almost become something that is normal and justified. Like it's okay for me to. I mean, I think it's different if you're driving and you're like talking to someone on the side, but I mean, for Josh, this, like when you're driving, sometimes you're taking a sip, you're taking a bite of a sandwich, and then you're listening to music, and then you're looking at the birds outside, and then you're focused on the road, but then you have to merge lanes. Like you don't think about it, but you're like doing all these things at the same time. And I feel like I would pose the argument that like all of doing all those things together definitely like weighs on you and like has there's a lot going on. Like your mental RAM, if you will, or your memory, that's your working memory, right? Is like being completely used up.
Yeah.
And it's like no wonder. Yeah, it's like no wonder at the end of the day you're so drained and tired when you look back at your day. Like, what did I do? But I think it's because you've been trying to do all these things at the same time. And it's instead of focusing on like one thing, getting one thing done, and then moving to the next thing.
So I think this is a great prompt, and we can throw it to you too, David, in terms of the concept of focusing. Like that's very practical, right? Or based on I'm hearing you say is like in order to be efficient, we try to do multiple things at the same time. Think about multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
Like the multitasking approach, if you will, right? But you're saying there is maybe more, you can be more productive and effective in your work by doing things one at a time, is what I'm hearing.
So right? I think I want to make I think the caveat is like the quality of the work too. I think there's seasons in my life where I overloaded everything that I wanted to do. And it was you were there in that season, like it was good. It was you were checking things off. It was like, I don't know, it was probably like 4 or 5 part-time jobs. It was just like trying to make sure I imagined it. The analogy that came up was like trying to keep these balloons just like afloat. Like I don't know if you ever played the game where like you're trying to keep everything up, or like you're juggling, right? Yeah. Like the whole point of juggling is throw something up, catch the next thing, and then throw it up before the next thing falls down. Yeah. Right? And the goal is to not drop anything.
Right. Yeah.
But if you think about it, if you're running life in a way where you're juggling all these things, there's never a point where you could just sit still and just hold, right? Like you're just putting on a show, almost like a performance. Right. Nothing gets the time to really like sit there, because you can't. As soon as something's up, you have to move it to the next hand and throw it up before the next comes down.
Wow.
Right. So in a way, my life was situated in that way. Like it was almost like I had to toss the next thing up so that I can grab onto the next thing, and then toss that up so I can grab onto the next thing. Like it was just this repeated hamster cycle, treadmill, if you will. Yeah. And it was like doing so many things horribly. Yeah. Like doing so many things, but horribly. And I think the misconception with that, which to turn it back to a question to you guys also, is like how often do we just try to add more to our plate, but really that's just like eliminating other things and spreading us more thin, to where we have a bunch of variety on our plate, but there's no actual depth to any of those things. You have broccoli, you have potatoes, you got mushrooms, but you got like a single broccoli floret. You got like a single grain of rice. Yeah. Like that's not enough to satiate your hunger, right? You need like the full bite to really experience the fullness of how good that mashed potato tastes. Yeah. Right, but instead you're just taking like a little teaspoon and tasting it. Like that's not enough. Right. And I think that whole analogy of like just being able to substantially and like since then I've kind of pulled back the trigger and focused on a few things, right? Whether it's nursing, podcast, and bodybuilding, nothing else. And just doing those things well and being the best I can be in those areas, I found to be like a lot more beneficial for me in terms of focus and not feeling like I'm just like doing a bunch of stuff really poorly. So I don't know. Do you guys resonate with that in terms of like just trying to always add on to? I mean, I'm sure Josh, you for like adding on to your plate and just, I think you have a similarity with that as well to myself.
Yeah, I learned it from the back.
Well, so don't say you learned that from me, man. Don't say.
I gotta give credit where credit.
No, that's not the credit I want. That's not the credit. But no, in all honesty, though, like, how do you like walk me through how you maybe not like make those decisions of add to your plate, but do you feel the same way of having to spread thin and then something has to give and take, right? Because that's what I'm kind of coming down to.
You go first, David.
Like adding one thing means you have to remove another.
Yeah.
I have a story later, but
got it. So are you asking like how does it feel to get spread thin and how does your focus?
I mean, how do you
in that?
How do you guys navigate that struggle of always wanting to improve, right? As someone who holds like self-improvement at such a high level of like wants to improve and become better at who they are.
Right.
How do you hold that idea, but then also the truth of like knowing that you can't just pursue 1,000 things at once? Because the world will always tell you you could do more, you could do more, you could do this and that.
Yeah.
When I think biblically, there's this aspect of doing less, and less is more.
Less is more.
Which I think is a different idea that we can walk into as well. So
yeah,
I'm just curious to pose that question.
I think to reinforce that idea that less is more, I recognize it's the essence of quality over quantity. Mm-hmm. And so when you walk in the less quantitative things in your life, but they are things that are fulfilling and satisfactory to what you need as a person, I think the focus is all there because you're actually having your needs met. I think a really good example of this, I mean, we've shared, whether that's with your academic life of you have a research paper to do, you have homework to do, you have, clinicals or labs to do. Being present in all of those means, I think, showing up, being open-minded and going throughout that process, but being attentive is knowing and learning what that process and what those things have to offer you has, and being honest to retrieving and receiving what that moment has. And so I think that's a beautiful synergy of understanding what it means to be present but also attentive at the same time, and the distinction between those two. And so I think with focus and just the beauty of balancing multiple things, I think for me, I really want to encourage and reinforce the idea that taking one thing at a time is probably the way to go. One step at a time. Like, you're juggling 10 things, but if you can juggle these 10 things one step at a time, I think the quality of focus is met, and you're actually able to achieve so much greater in those less than the 20 more things you could be doing quantitatively that seem like more, but it's not necessarily more.
Yeah.
Word.
Yeah.
Well, I'll not push back against you, but just give an alternative perspective from someone who thinks that more is more.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that
more is more.
Yeah, when I was working 3 jobs, I think that I initially had 2 jobs, and I think that I was under the impression that this was good enough. I was working way more hours than most normal people do, and not earning still enough. And I felt like the decision to do more was out of necessity. But what I think was most interesting was once I graduated from college and I went from working 3 jobs to working 1 job, it was very difficult for me to be satiated with that, right? Because I think that there was this perspective sort of subconsciously that I developed that I was really only valuable if I was doing more. And so yeah.
I think it's interesting to add on to the idea of more is more. Kind of entertaining that idea, because I feel like the chase to make more money is also the more hours you work, the more money you make. Right? That's kind of true in some ways, but then it's also well, then that can't necessarily be the solution, even though I think people run with that ideology in their head of and I think that's why we have this culture of work hustle culture, because you see that like the more you put in, the more you get out. But I think in reality, to your point, also the flip side of that is like the more you put in, sometimes in some cases, the less you get out because of how much the quality of those inputs you're putting into that machine.
Yeah, I mean, and I think another thing to point out, even in addition to that, is like the more you put out, the more you put out, the less you have to give to the things that maybe really matter, right? And it's really interesting. There's a guy at my church. He's one of the most gentle people I've met, and his like sole job is to like organize the chairs and vacuum the church in the morning. And you would think like that sounds very simple, like that sounds like but he has so much affirmation and so much fulfillment through what he does, right? And I think seeing him and talking to him and seeing the smile that he has on his face while he's doing what he's doing, like has totally transformed the way that I've viewed where am I putting my attention into? Yeah. And even secondarily, is the thing that I'm putting attention into giving back into me, right? And so, kind of going back to what I was talking about with the full-time job, it took me probably around 3 or 4 months to be able to adjust and actually be able to enjoy only doing one thing. Because I was so under that mindset of more is more. I have to do more. I was trying to go into like school. I was trying to add more onto my plate, and it took me a while to realize what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? And once I sort of let go of that mentality that I had to do more to be more valuable, my job became so much more fulfilling because I was able to focus all of my attention into my job and do an even better job because I was only focusing my attention on it.
Right.
You know, and like being able to do things outside of work, like my weekends became more valuable versus on the weekends I was trying to apply to other programs and trying to research. Like I was trying to find the next thing to add onto my plate for no reason.
Yeah.
Except believing that doing more will make me more valuable when it really wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, that story. That reminds me of a story that I read earlier this week about a priest that goes to a monk, and he goes to him in order to like basically figure out like life, and like he's like, why do I feel so down? So he goes to the monk and he's like, how do I do this? Like, what do I do? So they go down and sit for a cup of coffee and tea, right? I guess they would have tea there, not coffee. So they have they set down the herbal tea, and he like pours a cup for both of them. And the monk pours a cup for himself, and then he starts pouring for the priest. And he pours and pours until it's full. And the priest looks at him and is like, all right, that's good. And then the monk keeps pouring. And so the water like overflows across the cup. And now it's on the table, and he keeps pouring, and the priest is like, no, we're good. The cup is full. And the monk just keeps going. He keeps pulling. The water now is drenched off the table onto the floor, dripping onto his pants. And the priest is like, stop. The cup is full. And the monk goes and looks at him, and he turns to him and he's like, that's right. So come back to me when you have more space in your cup. Right? I think that story portrays like this beauty of like so often we're trying to add more to our cup. Yeah. When that was like the answer he needed. He kind of figured it out himself. He's like trying to pour more and more into this teacup that's already full. He has no more to hold on to. And I think it's worth talking about the idea of like, what does it look like to let go in order to add more? Like, what does it look like to be able to say, no to one thing, to say yes to something else that's a little bit more valuable?
Right.
Well, it feels like you're making like an attention budget. Like if you could put it like on a pie chart,
I mean, in some ways it's time blocking, right?
Yeah, it is time blocking. Yeah, essentially.
But I mean, I think time also isn't necessarily equated to attention. Like I could spend 5 hours doing homework that Josh will only take 2 hours to do, right? So I think it's not just the time you allot to something.
Well, that was kind of going back to what you were saying about like the quality of your time.
Quality of time,
right?
Yeah.
Where it's like Just being honest, transparency here is the name of the game. But it's like kind of going back to like that childhood story. Like that didn't apply just to like playing Monopoly. Like that was my academic experience. We actually kind of talked about that on the way here, interestingly enough. And like you guys talking about, like in terms of your difficulty or lack thereof when it comes to studying in school. Like I struggled all the way until my sophomore year of high school, studying too. Like I would put in the work, but it would take me a lot longer to be able to actually sit down and do homework because of how my brain, just because of my ADHD, was wired differently, right? And so you're absolutely right. Like I don't think it's about the amount of time, but it's about the intention with the time. Because what could take you 30 minutes with my ADHD maybe takes 2 hours. You know.
Yeah.
And I also think that that's something that I think this is kind of another conversation. Is like, how do we have grace for the attention of other people? You know, because I think that that's something else to be noted about. So, like, for example, like, my dad's a busy person, right? And we aren't able to spend quality time as much as I would hope. But there's also the grace in knowing that his plate is full, or his cup is full, you know?
Yeah.
And so how do we have grace with the people around us and have grace and support and extent of, like, offering ourselves to them when they themselves maybe don't have the capacity to be present, you know? And I think that's like the conversation about relationships we talked about, right? In terms of like the 50, is it always 50-50? Is attention always 50-50? Is being present always 50-50? No. It might be 60-40. It might be 80-20. It might be 90-10. It might be 95-5, you know? And so, I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of like a time blocking in a sense? I think might be a starting part.
I think that it's important to definitely be able to have a system in which you organize your time. Because if you don't, then unlike money, I think in some ways, as much as we're calling it a currency, time has its way of slipping and charging you without you necessarily paying for it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Right? Because regardless of whether or not you choose to put your time towards something, it's going to go towards something. Time is always being used up.
Right.
Right? Just because you decide to sit here and stop everything you're doing, time is still running.
Yeah.
But I think the concept time is interesting. Like it's definitely human made in terms of like the years and like the way we understand the world in terms of like the sun and how it moves up and down. But in regards to being able to, at the end of the day, like for me, it's like knowing how to utilize my time well, I think is the root of it. And I think time blocking definitely does help with organizing a way to do that and to use your, you know, because life's short, I think, and time is obviously a running resource. And like that, I think it's more of like a faucet and it's always running, but what are you going to do with that water? Are you going to choose to water the plants, or are you just going to let it run into the soil and do nothing, right? And that's like the lifeline we have, like I don't know, holy water, if you will, whatever it is, like the water that gives life. It can either, you know, be there and cause mold that just sits there, or you see these running streams of water, these beautiful big blue oceans, right? Like water can look so beautiful in so many capacities, but at the same time, water can be so, you know, destructive in the form of tsunamis and hurricanes. And so there's this contrast of like, how are you choosing to spend that water in some ways, if you will? How are you choosing to spend that time?
These are all wonderful imagery and wonderful examples and experiences.
David, have there been moments when you were feeling not present as a result of your lack of attention capacity, and what were some ways that you felt like you addressed that or tried to address it?
Most certainly, yes. And I think moments that come on top of my head would be like leadership trainings. I think I've been to a lot, plenty of leadership trainings ever since like around high school time and up until college and post-grad, and so a lot of that focus of energy is okay, let me sit down, let me be present and listen to what these speakers, these public communicators have to say, and these leaders. But then going through almost the same ropes, as almost as if you wake up every single Sunday to go to church, and you listen to a sermon and it's like, oh, like this is kind of just like a message that I've heard all over again. Then I think that's where the attentiveness starts to either get disrupted, or you can become more focused and driven in that focus to actually listen and be more satisfied through that driven focus. And so what I mean by that is, I think given if there are distractions in particular places that you're familiar with, whether that's a sermon every Sunday at church, or whether that's you, like for me personally, going to leadership training so often, whatever that looks like, I think having that balance of, once again, that open mind and that self-awareness of, okay, I'm going into this space and this is what I'm going to get out of it, like understanding the purpose for being there. But then if I know that I'm not achieving that, then taking one step back and recognizing, okay, what can I do so that I can be more present and achieve that? And I think that's where the attentiveness comes from. Because you're actually focusing then on what exactly you're trying to extract from that specific experience, that space.
So it's like looking for purpose is kind of what I'm getting the sense of. Like, so for example, right? Like when you're going to a sermon, perchance, right? I will confess, sermons were not always the most exciting thing for me as a kid. You know, but I have to think, and this is to your point, right? I have to think is because as a kid I couldn't fully understand why I went to listen to sermons, right? I didn't have the attention span to understand the language. I didn't have the cognitive ability to even like engage with those concepts, right? But that's the value of children's ministry, right? Is because it meets you at the level that you can understand why we're doing what we're doing, right? So it's like, today we're going to talk about Noah's Ark. But it's like, what did Noah, like, there's a change, there's like a meeting at your level, and it's like, as a child, you can understand, I'm learning this because God is good, right? As an adult, when you're going into like a leadership training or listening to a sermon, you have the cognitive ability and attention span, hopefully, to be able to understand the reason why you're there, and that, like you said, makes you attentive. I can also, but the opposite could also be true, right? Like if you are not a Christian, or like you don't have a faith and you go to a church, like you still probably don't understand the purpose of a sermon.
Right.
Even though you have the cognitive ability, the attentive capacity to be present. You can't, because you're like, I don't understand why I'm here.
Right.
So why am I? But then I think this goes to your point of like, that's the importance of your perspective and your attitude, right? Because I went to a mass service recently, and I'm not Catholic, but my attitude was, I really want to see the purpose of this. Like, I'm looking for that. Even though I'm not familiar, I'm still attentive. You know what I mean? And like, I think that's an attitude that you can have about any sort of experience that you have, and we'll get into this in the next episode. When you're learning something new or being exposed to something new, is the way that you're coming about it. And like you said, attention is one of the most important parts of that process.
Yeah, I think it's different. It's interesting too. I wonder how attention, our ability to be attentive to something or to focus, changes as we age. Right? Because I think that idea is so interesting. When we're young, obviously we have somewhat of a shorter attention span. We can't sit down. We're antsy. We can't sit down for those long sermons. But when we're older, right, I would argue that there is some type of an equal distractibility, right? Like, there's doom scrolling. There's bills in our head. There's things that kids don't have to worry about that adults do. And I think in the process of like adulting too, in living the good life, I think it's interesting to also think about, like, in some ways we talk about this idea of like childlike faith, but what does it mean to eliminate? I don't think it's possible to necessarily eliminate bills or eliminate the like the crushing weight of what adulting feels like. We were talking about yesterday, David, as we were sitting in line for In-N-Out. But it's like this pressing pressure on you that you can't necessarily let go of. But in some ways, like a pressure cooker where you slowly release pressure, right? Like that's how you manage stress. You like shh. And over time, like you're able to mitigate that and, maintain kind of some type of composure. But yeah, I think it's interesting that our ability to concentrate is hard when we're young and still hard when we're old. Like that doesn't change. It's across the board, no matter what age you are.
But what's very interesting though, that I think I kind of want to rummage on for a second there is like that childlike attention span and focus, right? So it's like, I think that kind of to what you're saying earlier, as a child, your life is sometimes for better or worse, more simple, right? You don't have bills. You don't have a job. You don't have finances. You don't have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's also what makes being a child so great. Is like I remember some of my most fond memories as a kid was going to visit my grandparents' house in Walnut Creek and spending a week literally trying to find things to do. But like there was something to be said about there was no plan. There was really no expectation of what we were going to be doing. And so if we spent the entire day at the park, then we spent the entire day at the park. And I feel like the attention that we gave to that, like I felt like my fulfillment was like...
You know what's really interesting with that is like the more, because you know me as a very like meticulous, scheduled out person, type A. But then the older I get, the more I really actually value not having a plan. The valuing spontaneity.
Yeah.
And David knows the extent of how that can be in my life sometimes.
More recently.
More so recently, but to that point, like that's something that I had to learn and pick up. In the event of trying to pursue structure, I found out that I was really finding out that spontaneity is what I really enjoyed and brought almost this thrill of life. Because if every cupcake looks the same, it's no fun. But when you have certain icing on it, then that's when, it's like icing on the cake. A lot of people say like, oh, icing on the cake is a phrase where it's just extra. But I think icing on the cake is definitely what tops it off. It's like you have your foundational vanilla or chocolate, whatever you like.
Yeah.
But it's that wow factor that adds onto it. I think it's so true. Like we seek, like in the pursuit of structure, sometimes like we value, there's value in not setting an agenda, not checking your time all the time, just having things flow as they are.
Right. But I guess an interesting point, and I want to point, like, especially you guys being more spontaneous than myself, it's interesting because, right, you would think that a lack of organization and a lack of structure would then make it harder to focus. But I think that sort of prompts the conversation of the relationship between attention and being present. Right? So it's like you guys doing a spontaneous, I don't even know what you guys did, but like there was probably very little plan, or it was kind of like, oh, let's just go kind of do this thing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you guys were very present.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You were very attentive to each other and attentive to the direction that it was going.
Yes.
But not necessarily the attention wasn't driven by the structure. Does that make sense?
I think that's actually really interesting because I think when we try to have structure in our planning, like our attention on the structure itself can supersede our ability to be present in the moment.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Right? Because we're so focused on, say, like, we want to get this podcast done in 45 minutes, and I'm always checking the clock, but that takes me away from being present in the conversation that we're having now.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's this balance of I don't want this episode to go on for an hour and a half, obviously.
Yeah.
But then there's that part of like, okay, how can I disengage with that and really enter into this time where I want to just have this conversation and be natural and like enjoy it and be in the moment of it.
Yeah.
And I think spontaneity does play a role in that for sure.
It keeps you on your toes.
I think you have to because you don't know what's next.
Yeah, you have to be attentive because you're like, are we gonna turn? Are we gonna like? It kind of feels like it feels like driving the Autobahn in Germany versus like driving like a go-kart track.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the Autobahn is literally a straight road. You could be driving at like 200 miles an hour,
Right.
but you're driving on a straight road. Like the structure makes sense. But then if you're driving on like a go-kart track, yeah, you might have driven this track before, but you're like still constantly turning. You know, it's like how much more attention do you need to spend driving on a straight road up to 5 freeway versus driving on the Grapevine or driving up to Big Bear? Like,
Right.
it's such a different type of attention because you're constantly like trying to anticipate. You're like, you don't know what's next. You don't know what comes next.
Right.
You know. But then think about this way: when it comes to our attention, right? If I were to drive up to Big Bear, like people who live up in Big Bear, I'm sure, I don't know if you've driven up to Big Bear before, yeah? Like, there are people who commute that road every day, right?
Yeah.
They have grown to be, in some senses, if we're running with this analogy, to be spontaneous. And where it's like they're now sort of they've sort of restructured their mind to be able to be attentive and present in spontaneity as a default, less so than it is like I'm a 5 freeway driver versus I'm a Big Bear driving up driver when it comes to my attention.
Yeah, I think it could definitely go both ways. I think someone that's making that 9 to 5 commute can so like just drive, like, because when I'm driving, which I try to avoid at all costs, is like drive during traffic hours in LA. It's like, heck no, I'm good. But that's why I work night shift. I just don't like traffic, but I'm always driving against it. But when I do hit traffic, it's like I take a moment to look around, and I encourage you to do that too when you do drive in traffic, to look around and like to read the expression on people's faces around you. It's kind of it's almost zombie like you see these people like are just coming off of work and they're just like, they look like they don't have life in them.
They're void.
And it's, I think to your point too, it's like the same experience of us getting to point A to point B looks the same from beginning to end. But that journey, I think that's where the journey matters more than destination, is that like that journey matters. Like how you get there matters, because one person can have a frown on their face while the next person can have a smile.
It's like that quote of like taking the scenic route.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't take the scenic route because it's more convenient. You take the scenic route because it's less straightforward, you know. For the sake of like the value of that experience. You know, it's like, okay, you might drive 5 more minutes, but how much more life that you got by taking a different route. And you and I were talking about this the other day. Where it was like talking about how like maybe the unconventional route is sometimes the route that God wants us to go, but in our, like, based on the culture that we live in and based on the values of our system, we're told not to. You know, we're told to take the more convenient, straightforward, as fast as possible route. When in actuality, the windy, scenic may take you 3 hours longer to get there on the one freeway driving up to Santa Cruz. That's the route that God wants you to take.
That's I think interesting thought come to mind, because we literally have, I mean, as someone who drives, right, like we even have these lanes on the highway called like fast track. And like the idea that they actually charge you more to go faster in life. I think that concept I think the concept is interesting. I don't know if you ever guys thought about this, but it just came to mind, like this idea that we have to kind of like pay more in order to go faster, when all that could have been mitigated if we just like left a little earlier to work or something like that, you know? And so like the value of time is obviously there. Like society values time, and you've often heard time is money. Time is money, but you know, like what if this is an interesting kind of situational sitcom, but like what if they made fast track free? You think everyone would just ride the fast track lane then? Like, or would people voluntarily choose to go the slow lane? Obviously, everyone would go fast lane, right? No one like goes to the grocery store waiting, like looking for the line that's the longest, and it's like, I want to sit in that line and wait. Right. Unless you're someone that wants to like engage in conversations and like just is there in the moment, right? But that's actually something John Mark Comer talks about in this book.
I know. I was literally talking.
Slowing down is like these practices, and one of them is choosing the longest line in the grocery store when you're lining up. And it's this upside down concept of the world where we always seek the fast track lane, and we're willing to even pay a pretty penny for it, right? Like fast track's not cheap just to drive the same way, just with less traffic, right? But
Wow.
yeah, I think it's such a food for thought. It's just such a food for thought.
Wow. What a great conversation, guys.
Yeah.
Any last comments, notes? I can go first, David.
Where are we at right now?
I'll go first.
Yeah. I'm at.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
yeah, we're rounding out.
No, in terms of attention, kind of like what I was saying at the beginning. Like I mentally treat attention now like cash. Like it's expendable, and every time you make a decision to focus on something, you are giving it away. That doesn't necessarily mean like just with cash, like you can spend money on good things, but like you can also spend your money on not good things.
Yeah.
Right.
Things that don't really truly feed you. I can go spend my food at McDonald's, or I can spend it on a $5 rotisserie chicken at Costco.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh.
It's like, and I think that like your money matters and your attention matters. So like, don't waste it.
Yeah, I think to add on to that as a last note is for me is learning how to utilize that where I put my water. I think it's like much like our attention is a running faucet, the same way the time is. It's getting expended whether we
That's crazy.
like it or not. We can't turn it off.
Yeah.
You can't stop time. You can't freeze it, right? We're no like superheroes here.
What are you talking about? Speak for yourself. I'm just kidding.
Like Doctor Strange. Time stone. No, but no, we can't.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and as much as we can't necessarily, we can go back in time, which is something we might talk about later in the next episodes. A little foreshadow for you guys there. But bringing it back into this one, I don't think that we can necessarily stop time and freeze it as much as I'd like to sometimes and pause in the moment. But I will say there's times in life where it feels that way.
Yeah.
It feels like life is just pause for a minute.
Yeah.
And I just think about how often can I emulate that feeling of feeling like, okay, like this is just being in the moment. Like I can freeze frame this. David?
Yeah, I think this one finishing thought in my head that I was concluding was I was thinking relationally in like social relationships and dynamics with like family or really close friends. I'm a really big advocate for if someone is not necessarily giving you the attention while you're being so present with them, then it almost isn't worth being able to beg or fight for that attention or that focus that you need from them. And it's not that you necessarily, are coming to them and like necessity wise, I need your attention, but more so, it's in any case, if you show up to a softball game and, you're there to support your friend and, she sees you in the stands, that means a lot. She's being attentive, but then, she doesn't even come to say hi after your game. I mean, that kind of loses the attention and the focus. And, whether that's another conversation that you have a very close talk with a dear friend of yours and they're not necessarily listening, maybe they're scrolling on their phone. I think things like that is kind of the essence of what our focus here is. When we're talking about attention, talking about presence, when we're talking about time, I think it's important to recognize that. So yeah, that's closing for me.
Yeah, that's a word. End us off in prayer. Father God, thank you for this time. Thank you for just bringing us here on a beautiful morning and just letting us enjoy the birds chirping in the background and the beautiful greenery and the space that we have. I just pray that we learn to appreciate the things that we already have and not just always try to pursue the next thing, but just appreciate and be able to be present because most often that's where you are. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this, to be able to have conversation about this important topic, about distraction, about our ability to focus and ultimately focus on you is, I think, the goal of our lives. And may it be a reflection of that. May we be able to turn our attention to the right things and away from the wrong things. If we have to repent, may that be the case. But I just pray that you give us grace, you give us mercy as we move forward in this season, in our journey. And I just I love you, God. Thank you so much for your grace and mercy. Thank you for this conversation. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. That's episode 7.
That is episode 7.
Yeah. Alrighty. And that will bring us to the end of episode 7 of season 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's The Good Life, your practical guide to adulting. Like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps support the channel out. Love you guys. See you guys in the next one. Peace.